There you go.
Okay, it is 5:32 and we will begin the TCP Building Design Committee meeting. And I will open with a few comments. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19 coronavirus, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and the steps communities can take to prevent the spread, and all town facilities are currently open by appointment to the public. In addition, in accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. The meeting will be recorded and be able to be found on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting. The following information is also provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link below, which was included in the agenda, to access the Zoom meeting. Or from a telephone, dial the toll-free number 888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID 813-7104-2959. The agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. And I have a minutes here. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. I will call the roll to make sure everybody is, our audios are working. Dave Passios,
Here.
Dave Blatt,
Present.
Michael Ray Jeffries.
I am here.
And I assume that everybody can hear me. Okay, is that?
Nope,
Yes.
can't hear you, boss. No.
I'll start over. Okay, I will begin by opening up to any public comments from the public. Okay, any public comments from the committee members? All right, everybody's quiet tonight. Okay, so the majority of what I wanted to discuss tonight was just to digest a bit more. Here's Matt. We'll wait for Matt. Hey, Matt, you're mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay, no problem. We just got started.
Gave you all the action items, Matt. So
Yeah.
we're all set. You know.
So we're just on to we just got through an uneventful public comment period with no comments. So we're just on the next agenda item, Matt.
Very good.
I really wanted to have a round table. The architect, and I forwarded some material to you folks from the architect regarding some cost reducing measures, as well as an email today that actually Dave Blatt asked that I request from the architect relative to a ballpark cost on what a tear down and reconstruction would look like from a financial standpoint. So really, I guess what I wanted to do tonight, and you'll notice that the architects are not here. I asked them not to come tonight so that we could just discuss this amongst ourselves. I really just wanted to have a round table with you guys. And now that we've had, I guess it's been 3 weeks to digest the cost that we were presented last time we were together, with the information that I sent out. I just wanted to kind of have a roundtable discussion with the committee in terms of your thoughts on any of the things that were presented last time, now that you've had a chance to digest it and think about it for 3 weeks, or any of the information that we received in the last couple of days from the architect. So, I'll just open it up to members of the committee with any, any thoughts, comments that you have relative to that. And I think with the goal that at the end of this, we need to move toward next steps. We need to solidify what our next steps are so that we can then, communicate that to the design team and figure out, where to go from here. So, and that may not happen in this meeting. It may take another meeting, but that's sort of our goal as far as I can see. So I'll open it up. Anybody that would like to.
So Greg, I'd like to just start the discussion, but can you allow the share screen for everybody else? I just want to pop something up real quick, just to make it easier for everybody.
You should be good to go now.
All right. Okay, here we go. All right. So what I'm sharing is the latest that you gave us on the cost estimates.
Yep.
And, there's basically two main areas that we look at is this line here where we had the subtotal. And, this, which is, I'm excited that we've gone from 15 down to 14,570.
Yeah.
Which brought the soft cost, which I was impressed by how much that brought the soft cost down by, it looks like the soft cost went down by 2 million because of that. And I'm not sure if I understand that correctly, why that was so much.
I think they tightened up contingency, which
Okay.
I don't think is a good idea. I don't think that may or may not be a good thing. I mean, I just.
Oh, I see that now. You see it showing it right here. The design contingency percentage and subtotal, and this is really where we took the hit.
Yeah, which, when you're estimating a job like this and you need contingency, so I mean, that's a big question I have for them is, was your initial estimate, sorry to.
No, Greg, this is why I'm bringing it up exactly for this discussion.
That's one of my big questions is, guys, was your contingency just too high and you looked at it and you think that, no, it should be this, it should be lower, like they're presenting it now, or are you just trying to find a way to get the cost numbers down, which may or may not be in our best interest? I mean, contingencies are there for a reason. I mean, it's just, you need them for all kinds of reasons. We at the moment we need it because we haven't fixed the hard design, and once we get into construction set, they'll start to be able to whittle that down. And you also need it for just things that come up during construction and things. So, which might be another bucket. I don't know.
Okay, so it looks like he went from originally a 20% for contingency
down to 10.
Down to 10%.
Yeah.
Or a little bit even under that. And
So-
I don't know if, so this is the side where I needed help to say, hey, does that make sense to have it that, what amount we would need for contingency if there's a standard number there, And
Yeah.
so.
Greg, do you remember what you had for contingency for the middle high school? That was a $72 million project.
It was 5 million.
Yeah, that's what I had in the back of my mind, 4 or 5 million.
So there
For
we're
a much
talking,
bigger project.
right? So what are we talking then? 10, like about 6-7%.
But you got to remember, it was 5 million well, first of all, one thing to be said is that project was a GM at risk project, where or GM at risk, whatever, the general was with us through the whole. We had selected the general contractor already through the design process, and they were working with us on the cost throughout the project. So by the time we got to the end of ready to bid this, and they went out to bid for sub bids, they had been participating in that whole cost. So the contingency might have been a little less because they already had a lot of, I don't know how to describe it, but they absorbed some of the unknowns because they had been part of the process for the whole time. And they had been slowly whittling down the contingency as we made it to the different steps of the project. So, and I'm no expert in the difference between CM at risk and just and the model that we're using, which is a more conventional, like, just bid construction contract. But I just bring that up, that could have something to do with it. But you're right, that contingency was less by percentage.
Okay.
It does make sense though, for a brand new, for a tear down and a rebuild, there's less unknowns. So it makes sense that your contingency wouldn't need to be as high, because there are plenty of things that could go wrong when you're rehabbing versus building new.
That's true.
Okay. And the other side of this is if I take away from that, if I go further up and I just look at, okay, the cost here up top, I'm going, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show everything. Well, I can almost show everything at once. Hold on, let me try to get it. From the doors and windows, there's really not a lot other than an HVAC and electrical. There's not much where we can take cost out of this thing, right? Would you guys agree?
Most definitely.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's a big thing that that stuck out to me for sure. Yeah.
I mean, when I look at it as I have 5 million in HVAC and electrical out of a $15 million budget. A, I don't know if that makes sense, but B, I don't know how we're supposed to get any cost out of this. I guess I should have started with you guys. Do you feel this 14,570, 500, or I should say the 18,000 number is reasonable in anybody's mind to bring in front of folks?
No,
Well, actually, let's just say, let's skip that. I would go with, escalation, he's throwing escalation here. So if I start with this numbers, the 17,500, 17,500,000. I don't feel comfortable with trying to get this thing passed at that number. I don't know how you guys feel.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot for people to swallow when you're talking about a renovated, whatever. When was that building built, Dave?
1952, 53.
Talking about a renovated 70-year-old building you're talking about putting $20 million, 18, even if it's $18 million into it. I can see the questions now.
What was the cost of the teardown and rebuild that they?
He estimated that to be about 17, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. I'll put this up. I'll put it up. Hold on. Here we go.
I
So
think
this is the numbers he gave us for the teardown. So
yeah,
think of it this way. The 750 and the 2,500 are same on both. So if you take the 514 and the 13,750, those are the two numbers that's, for the building.
yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think I could get both screens on at once, but
And I just want to point out for everybody that's watching this, that this that's on the screen right now is a real high level ballpark cost comparison of what it might cost, what we might expect to pay for a project that was a tear down of a building and a rebuilding, not renovating an existing building. So just so that everybody understands, we asked the architect to give us a real basic, like back of the napkin level type analysis on real general per square foot costs. And this is what they came up with. So this is not based on any kind of design work or anything. So this is just more for the committee to have a reference point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in I kind of have a lot of mixed feelings. I believe very strongly that we need to have a functioning town hall as a town, right? I mean, and I don't think that the system that we have in place right now works. I think that we have New England has a lot of traditions, and one of those traditions is that city halls and town halls, and I know I'm a broken record, but I think we need to get out of Town Hall A and Town Hall B and Town Hall C and just have a town hall like most communities have. Having said that, looking at it from the standpoint of us as an employer, because that is, I think, the perspective that I try to contribute here. We have to do something different from that perspective. I don't think we're giving our employees, we wouldn't put teachers or children in the buildings that we expect our staff to work out of. And I think that we need to have the same standard across the board, that, just because you are, 35 or 40 does not mean that your working conditions should be so much worse. And I know that our town has a pattern of committing resources to children, as I think that we should. And we're more hesitant to do these kinds of projects, but the reality is that I think time has come for this to happen. Having said that, I see no point in rehabbing a building at more cost than it would be to just build a new one. That just doesn't seem, I mean, I'm not beholden to the brick and mortar at the TC Passios building, as much as I'm beholden to the concept of what we've put together. So I'm very interested now in if they can go a little more in depth on this, decide a quick ballpark, a more thorough ballpark of what will it cost if we were tearing it down realistically. Because I think that that's a question that town people would want to know. I mean, I would ask that question. I wasn't on this committee at town hall. I'd say, what would it cost 18 million to keep a 70-year-old building? Like, or not really 69-year-old building? What would that cost if we tore it down? I think that that's a whole separate conversation though, which is, with the correspondence back to the Board of Selectmen is we've looked into this, and to rehab, it's going to cost more.
So actually, can I ask then, Dave, can I ask your thoughts on this?
Sure. I agree. I mean, I've always said right from the start, if it didn't make sense to do this project the way we approached it, then I wouldn't support it. I've not to the point where I don't support rehabbing this building tonight, at least so far. I have some concerns, especially with if you look at the assumptions and notes underneath this estimate that's up on the screen now, there's one big assumption there, and this is one of the things that the Passios building footprint eliminates, and that's assume you're looking at a 2-story building. That's where they're getting some substantial savings in creating 50,000 square feet of workable, usable space. So I just bring that out as one thing to keep in mind. And again, I really think that these numbers are derived from a 50,000 square feet times a square foot, $1 per square foot number, which is what we've been messing around with for 8 years. This project that we're tasked with was to bring a real cost to bringing this building up to the uses that we've identified. The other thing is that 8 years ago, if we were looking at the numbers for the renovation of the amount of use that was in play 8 years ago, we'd be losing a third of this building. And also the escalators over 8 years has driven that number higher. And again, yes, I'm attached to the building with a family name on it, but if it doesn't make sense for the town to do it, I won't be able to support it.
So
Thanks.
if I can just pop in here, when we did the Village Center District zoning, we included this building specifically for a reason. We didn't know if it was going to be rehabbed or torn down. And if it is torn down, these numbers that are on the screen right now mean nothing to me, because I don't know if it's replacement in kind, then that's in my mind kind of stupid. I don't think that if we're going to tear that building down, that we would rebuild the same thing. It makes sense to me to make maybe a smaller footprint, but multiple stories. And even in the village center zoning, there was accommodation for a campus style for multiple buildings on a parcel. And I don't know if this actually meets the area requirement for that. It's not on top of my head, but and then another thing is one of their biggest suggestions for cost savings was to reduce the phases from 3 down to something less, either 2 or 1. I would assume that if it's a tear down and rebuild, then that would be a single phase. So there might be some of the cost savings as well, because they thought that would reduce the cost quite a bit, I thought.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I don't know how much I saw of that. Actually, that's a very good point, because where did we see that number of not having to do this, right?
Yeah, going from a phased to a non-phased.
Right.
There's nothing identified in here as the cost savings from doing that.
Well, I think it's the escalations for 21, 22, 23, and 24. If we did it in a single phase, then we might finish in 22 or 23, hopefully sooner than 23, but they don't even.
Yeah, Matt, not to interrupt, but so based on that, $125,000 savings, you think that's realistic?
That's not much.
Right. And
Yeah.
the other side, so that was the whole thing, is I thought it was up here, up towards the top when it came to general or something, I don't know whether it's the general or something here, because the idea was that, if you do it in one phase, we can shut the whole electric down. We can shut the whole water system down. You don't have to have the heat running, all that stuff. But I see no savings on here for any kind of plumbing, electrical, or HVAC in this whole thing. And that's the only thing that was one of the things I looked at. I was trying to figure out, where was the savings? I agree with you. Where was the savings for the different phases?
I recall him saying something about a construction trailer, and mobilization, and something else, I forget.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if they're going to do it in phases, you would have had part of the school guys still sitting there in that building. So you would have had to have the water, still would have had to cut off some of the water, but not all the water, cut off some of the electric, but not all the electric. So that's what I looked at as phases, that it would have been easier for those contractors to not come back 3 times or
Right.
twice, type of thing, not move everybody twice. I'm in the same boat. I don't know. I mean, to me, I'd like to be able to save the building. I'd like to be able to reuse the building. I'm just want to make sure that when we're done, we have a energy efficient building that will last us for another 60, 70 years. That's the biggest thing that's the biggest thing I have out of this whole thing.
I think 120 is probably the realistic goal.
Right. Okay. So no, I understand. But then again, if we're putting in 18 million on this thing, shouldn't it last another 50, 60, 50 or plus years?
Minimum. Yeah.
Right.
Well, something else I don't understand is we've got our town is sprinkled with 200-plus-year-old homes that are still functioning as homes. Now, I don't understand why something after 70 years is junk. Doesn't make sense to me.
What do you mean by that specific, Matt? I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, we heard Mr. Londa tell us that everything needs to be replaced. We've got the design engineers and the architects telling us that everything needs to be replaced. Well, I don't see how. I mean, certainly things are not up to code and they need to be, but the $20 million tag just threw me for a loop. And like I said before, I expected, a new roof, maybe a new boiler and some paint. I don't understand why everything has to be so fancy and expensive. And like I said, I grew up in a 200+ year old home. I bought another one, and my neighborhood is littered with them. And everybody seems to be very happy, and nobody has them falling down on their heads.
So Matt, I think what we've actually, what's proposed for the interior, I don't feel is fancy. I feel like it was pretty much kind of just stark. It's pretty much the basics, acoustic tiles in the ceilings, nothing really fancy as far as the hallways or anything like that. It's to me, it seems like the biggest thing we have is the complete infrastructure of, once again, the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. Well, not even the plumbing, the HVAC and the electrical. That $5 million budget is what's killing us right now on that day.
Yeah.
And I understand that it's old, but I don't know. I have trouble with that.
Guys, where's the structural upgrade built into these numbers? I glanced at it real quick the other day and I thought I had spotted
Yeah.
it, but
So
Section
it,
5.
right here, five right here.
yeah, okay. So it's a couple $100,000.
Right.
I've been approached by a couple of people in the public with some knowledge of building maintenance, renovations, so on and so forth. And one of the comments that was brought to me was that, the other alternative to preserving a building like this, and it would be spread out over a much longer period of time than we've been talking about, but phase the reuse and renovation of the building in such a way that you only impact 25% of the building on any single phase.
Yeah,
That's one of the possibilities of, that's why I wanted to see what the structural steel and stuff was, because all that has been kicked in because we're affecting more than 50% of the building.
yeah. What concerns me though, because someone reached out to me and brought the same thing of, well, why don't we just phase this differently? I think what concerns me is that, we have a current building code that we recognize is different than it was 80 years ago. And it's like, why are we knowing that things change, not always for the better, but when it comes to buildings, I do believe that a lot of the changes are for the better. So it's like, why are we going to stick ourselves to a 1940-something building code, knowing that we're not going to probably do anything else on this building for at least another 100 years? I mean, it would seem to me that we want to be more efficient, have a much more efficient building that's going to have a reduced footprint in terms of energy use, operating costs, anything we can do now that's going to reduce the cost to maintain it over time, to me is the better way to go.
Michael, could I ask you a question where you're in the facilities business?
Yep.
We're working here with, what is it, 53,000 square foot building? Let's round it down to 50,000 just for easy numbers. What would your expectation of periodic upkeep of a building of this size for 50 years? I'm just wondering if you could throw a number out there, because
I don't know if I could throw a number. I don't know if
Go
I
ahead.
could throw a number out there, but what I would say is that the benefit of a new building is that you pretty much know that the first 10 years you're not going to have any kind of mechanicals go wrong. Between 10 and 20 years, you're going to have to start looking at your heating systems and replacing some motors and some other components. But your critical infrastructure is going to last you for 20, 30 years, and at a minimum. A lot of times, I work in large buildings, and I mean, these are boilers that are 50 years old, before they get replaced, sometimes longer than that.
Right.
So it's much better with new construction because the coding requirements now do help buildings last longer, in my opinion. I manage properties. One of them is 12 years old. Another one was built in the 1950s. The one that was built in the 50s, it costs, I don't know, 3 times, 4 times as much to maintain than the newer ones. I have one that was built in 1988, a huge development that I manage. It's 36 buildings. What I have a meeting tonight about is that we need to take out a loan to redo a sewer treatment plant. But typically, your large expenses, so long as you're doing routine work, your large expenses hit you about every 30 years.
Okay,
So-
that answers my question, and I just want to make the comment that, and again, I don't have the numbers to back it up. It would take a while to gather them all up. But I question whether the building has had the money put into it that should have been put into it in the
No.
last 40 years.
I-
And that's what brings part of this cost way up. None of the infrastructure has been upgraded to the point. It's just been maintained and patched together.
Well, yeah.
That's one of the arguments in the cost to, bring everything up to snuff. Nothing was changed in 40 or 50 years.
Right.
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword though, I think, because, if we had put millions of dollars into a new roof 20 years ago, okay, we still would have had to rip it down now because, even in spite of the fact that it has more life in it, because we have to do structural modifications to the building to meet current code. So, yeah, I think you're right, Dave, in saying that, but I also think that you could have been putting money after it was, when you're sitting there 20 years ago thinking you need a new roof, you're working with a crystal ball to try to figure out what the final disposition of the building is going to be, because you can put money after bad. You could make it-
More to my point, though, we didn't put $10 million
Yeah.
in major infrastructure repairs into that. So I see that as kind of sitting in a bank that, we never spent it on the building. So
That's a valid point.
escalated cost at this point is partially covered by the fact that we didn't spend the money earlier. That's all.
Agree. The other side, though, I do look at this as we talked about this, though. I'm still, at the end of the day, I'm still having the same windows. I'm still having the parts of this building is still staying in its present state. The cost that we have here is not going for new windows or things of that sort that would help with the overall cost of the building in the long run. So I'm not sure if I really understand whether by taking out little dollars and cents here, we're truly building we're truly coming out with a building that's going to be with us for 30 years. I'm even going down to 30 years now because, if the windows are still the 1950s windows right
No,
now?
they're not. A lot
Oh.
of the windows in that building were upgraded. That was the one thing that was done.
All right. So, okay, I'll be nice and say 1990s windows then.
I'd say so. It might be a little bit earlier than that.
Okay. But still, you understand what I'm saying, Dave. It's not.
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. We, at the end of the day, if you don't take it down, you still get a 60-year-old building with modifications.
Right.
To add
And
to your point, Dave, I mean, this cost doesn't even account for pointing. I mean, pointing is millions of dollars. I mean, spending $330,000 on masonry work, that still doesn't take your existing brickwork and touch it up and make it last for another 60, 70 years.
I thought that was built in.
Can I call on John Londa here? He's been waving his.
Oh.
I thought he was going to hurt himself there, shaking the head.
Yeah. So let's be clear. It's 70 years next year, not 60. 10 years makes a difference. So you have a 70-year-old electrical system. You have a 70-year-old sprinkler system. You have 70-year-old plumbing. It is an old building. It needs a lot as a result. The things that have been done, and there have been a few things done. Back in '86, all the classrooms got new double hung windows. So you have a double pane window in the classrooms. And there was a follow-up project in 2000 that took care of the gymnasium, cafeteria, all the other ancillary windows that weren't part of that '86 project. In '86 also, they replaced the roof. So you're dealing with a 35-year-old roof at least. You have the boiler plant was the other big renovation that was, that was done in conjunction with the high school heating. And that was done at 1.5 million in 2003, 2004. So the boilers, yes, you still have more life on the boilers. They're not appropriately sized for the building because they were sized for a high school that was 100,000 square feet additional to the patios. And you have the hot water system that was replaced in 2004, which, at 15 plus years, you could be looking at replacing that just because of the age. So it's not like you don't have anything that's of value here, but your 70-year-old sprinkler system, it's 70-year-old piping. It's 70. We did do some replacements, but boy, it needs a lot, and you should expect a lot. So to pay a lot. The only factors I would say that are, the two things you could say, okay, well, you could save money by not phasing it. And then the other big thing, which, maybe could have been looked at earlier, was how much of the building you actually retain. Because that's the part where back in the TCP study, we had the removal of an entire wing, which means you demoed the asbestos and got it out, but you didn't have to replace any of the finishes, and you didn't keep any of that. Obviously things have changed since then, but that's my take on it. Is you've got some things of value, but not a lot.
So John, I understand when we talk about that at one point there was like a third of the building was being torn down. However, looking at the town's needs right now, and there was we've done an exhaustive study with the town, different departments, the schools, and everything like that. We are using, it feels like we're using all 50,000 square feet of this building pretty well. There's a lot of people being served by this building. Now, I know a lot of it is the schools, and for the schools right now, I think the schools are basically almost 40% of the building is going, or I'd say almost more than, if I'd say 40% of the building is going back to the schools. However, if they need it, they need it. And I'd rather have something that I'm not going to people in 5 years from now saying, oh, by the way, we need another building, or we need something else right now. So I do believe that we've done a very good, as a group, we've done a very good job of listening to everybody and trying to help as many different people in this town as we can with this building. The question being is, how do we, what do we do from here is more the thing. Are we ready to bring a $18 million proposal to town meeting at this point, to town meeting at this point is, I guess, my biggest question for everybody.
Yeah, no, I think the answer to that question is no. But something that was said earlier is a really good point, which is now that I do think we're going to need more money for us to work with architects and engineers. I do, and I think that we should realistically plan to ask for more money to do that. But I think that before we go and actually move forward with fully getting all construction documents for this, I think that we need to kind of think, if we think of leveling the building and starting from scratch, what would we come up with and how much would that cost realistically? Because, when we decrease the footprint of the building, we're going to save some operating costs. It's going to become a lot more efficient, a lot less pipes, a lot less ducts, a lot less wires as far as the distance that stuff has to travel. So, you need less of it if we do multi-floor. So I'm very interested in seeing what, as an alternative, how we can go about doing that.
So can I ask a question? Would it make sense in a way that the old primary school, the original primary school that's sitting there, that the building we have to do something with shortly, would that make sense as a site to level and build a town hall? Because you already have the parking lot there. And wouldn't it be nice to be able to make Paseos, that whole area, a park to be used by the kids, the school, and things of that sort, making that more of a green space than the idea of people talking about the old primary school of becoming a green space. And I know that's not our, once again, I'm going outside our charter, but it's just a thought as we think about things here a little bit.
The only argument I have, if I could step in for just a second, is I've thought of that process also. But you got to remember that, Dave, what you just said was we build a town hall on the old primary property and we throw everybody else that we've got planned in the building out in the rain.
No. I'm saying we do the 50,000 square foot building on that property.
You don't have enough room for it.
Make
Unless
it-
you multi-story it.
Right,
Yeah.
but this is a 2-story they're proposing. So they're
Well, that was
proposing
three. Cool.
a 25,000 square foot building, 2 stories.
Well, and, you know, I think Michael Ray just said 3 stories. If you're doing 2 stories, you gotta have an elevator, so 3 isn't a big deal.
Right.
You know,
Understand. And by the way, guys, that's just was one of those thoughts, was because I'm just looking at it as, I don't know what the number was that somebody told me to tear down the old primary school because we can't find anybody for that property. But that's, you know, that's a tear down. I mean, I don't know. Anyway,
Half a million dollars to tear it down roughly.
right. Which is the same number we're getting for this place, is $500,000
Right.
for the patios.
Yep.
And,
No,
you know, that's what they gave us in the other presentation. So that was what they said here. They said,
That was
bear with me a
7.
second here. Oh, I lost it. Oh, well, sorry, guys, I lost it. For some reason, Gmail stopped working on me.
We see it.
okay, it was 17 million.
No, he was looking for the other page.
Oh.
Yeah, here we go.
18 million.
Here we go. So they talked about building demolition of $500,000.
But you got the abatement.
You
That
got the
goes into
abatement
that.
there too. You got $1.2 million.
So, I mean, aren't I gonna have the abatement at the primary as well? The old primary? As
That
well?
number included it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a bargain now. Now you're really talking here. Now I just knocked off.
I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, on the select board, I mean, you know, we do have one selectman who very adamantly speaks to this. And if I can kind of parrot some of the things that she's contributed, you know, there is a sentiment out there. I don't agree with it, but there is a sentiment out there that says that is a great site for a future town hall. That, you know, if you put the building over there, that you can have a public green in the back, you can use a kind of similar footprint, make it a multi-story building, and it could meet everyone's needs. You know, the other side of that is that there's now a house that's like right there, and that completely changes the use, as well as the parking lot that we have an easement with the Historical Society, so we're a lot more limited on that lot with what we can actually do. And the available space, in my opinion, is a lot smaller. And I think that town halls need to be visible from like the main road.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I know that I'm just trying to be cognizant of time, but are we looking at having them sharpen their pencils a little bit about what it would be to rebuild? You know, to tear down and rebuild?
I mean, I guess that's what I'd like to get a consensus from the committee of what we think we'd like to go back to them at. I do want to be cognizant of the fact that things like that are outside their initial scope of work are certainly going to come back to cost us more in real costs, dollars, design dollars from them. And we may have to have that conversation with Heather about how we're going to procure those extra services. But we don't, that's not a discussion for this committee, but if at least we can figure out, you know, the specific questions, even if they're big ones, that we want to ask them, then I can go back and work with them and Heather to try to figure out how we're going to get there.
Just something I'd like to throw out. If we were to ask them to sharpen their pencils on both proposals and give us what they feel is a good number on both proposals, put a little bit more time into the tear down rebuild, and consider maybe discussing it with the Board of Selectmen and bringing those two comparisons to town meeting, not as a proposal, but more as, you know, I don't know. I'm just thinking, if we get a feel from another town meeting, we're not going to be able to bring a finalized proposal to annual town meeting at this point anyway.
No.
But if we brought a presentation that gave them accurate numbers for the two things that we're looking at here tonight, and got a feel from town meeting as to what it sounds like they would support, then we should be able to pull something together for a special town meeting in the fall.
But for
Or
that,
it goes in a totally different direction.
and but in order for them to fine tune that rebuild cost, I think we're all in agreement that a new building would not look like the one that we're remodeling. And
Right.
so the rebuild cost then would be different with a different layout. So, I mean, do we then need to ask for more money so that way we can kind of come up with what that secondary option could be? Design money.
Well, that's the question. I mean, if we don't, I mean, I think we need to, I guess here's my opinion. Big broad brush. It seems like we have questions that have been put on the table, like, or at least comments from Dave Blatt and some others that like, all right, we've got 5 million in electrical and HVAC systems in this estimate. Are you sure? Or are there any ways we can, we need your final and best on that. And if the answer is, and it is what it is. And then when they took out the phasing, it just doesn't seem like they took out the phasing because it didn't impact some of the numbers that we expected it was going to impact. So I think my point is, I think the first thing we need is to make sure that the committee is comfortable with the fact that they have given us the best cost estimate, but the best, the lowest cost estimate possible to achieve what we set out, what we agreed to a few months ago in the preliminary, when we approved the preliminary design. And if that number ends up being 17 million or whatever, I'm making it up at this point, but if that, maybe it ends up being what it is now, maybe we can get it down to 18 million. Then, we have to say, okay, we have to determine as a committee, that's still not going to work for us. But I think the first question might be, it just seems like I'm getting sentiments like, from at least a couple of you that skepticism is a strong word, but
I'll give you that. I'll give you that skepticism.
just, yeah, like, are we sure we have all the cost savings that we can, that we can expect to get out of this, in this revised estimate? And so, I think it's worth going back to them and just making sure, because there's enough. I recall them talking to us about the kinds of savings we could realize if we took the phasing out, and thinking, oh, well, that could be significant because of its impact that it has all the way down the sub bids columns. So to me, that's the first step. Asking them to do a number. I could try to work with them, and Heather and I could try to work with them to figure out what it's going to cost them to get us a better cost estimate for a tear down and a new construction. But I think we're going to end up with a number that's like what was presented in the TAPE study. It's going to be a real preliminary. It's still going to be a very preliminary number because they wouldn't have put in any. They're not going to.
So Greg, let me phrase it this way then. I'd like to ask them, right, that as you mentioned, is this truly the best and final that they have? Because the other side of this is equipment by owner. So there's still going to be $100,000, another $250,000 of cost for equipment of some sort and things of that sort.
Yeah.
And then the other side of this would be, I would propose that once we have a number, I'd like to get the sentiment of the select board as to what they feel, if that's a reasonable number, or should we proceed with the idea of getting a cost on a rebuild? If that makes sense. This way, because it's us. We have a bunch of taxpayers, and that's about it. I'd like to understand from the board, what they were maybe thinking about the numbers here, and because after all, it's a building for them too. It's it's their town hall.
Yeah, I just don't want to talk for them, but I think what they might do is look at us and say, I don't know. That's why we commissioned you. Why we commissioned you guys to.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing is, in fact, I always have this problem with town meeting because, right, it's 120 people making the decision for
Yeah.
all 10,000, whatever, 12,000 residents of town.
Yep.
I don't feel comfortable that there's, 6, 7 of us making the decision for the whole town. And I feel that at least the Board of Selectmen have been elected to help make decisions for us as townspeople, and it's, that's all.
I don't think it's a bad idea, Dave. I don't think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, some preliminary, I think I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. When I give committee reports, there's not often feedback or responses to it. So, I mean, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. Certainly, I think this cost is a bit high. I have talked to the town manager about how we can absorb this. And based on the information she's provided, she does not see a budgetary problem with us being able to absorb this if the work were to start next year and if the debt were to come on, fully come on the schedule in 23 or 24. But I mean, I do know that, we never operate in a vacuum, and there's, I have heard many people say that the town's going to be looking at another significant building expense at Turkey Hill. And that's, while that's not something that we're looking at, I think that cost is going to be, that's going to be something in the back of people's minds, that the focus is always on children, which is a good thing. But the focus is always on children. So if you're asking the townspeople to decide between giving our employees better working conditions, having a better environment for them to operate, or quality of education, I think the answer is always going to be quality of education. So, however we proceed, I think we have to do so in a way that doesn't make it seem, and that really doesn't seem as though somehow this project will prohibit another project from happening.
Yeah.
Michael, very, very well said. The other thing, I'd just like to make a comment about our task as this committee and what we've got before us right at the moment and what we'll hopefully have in the next couple of weeks. And that is that I think we've done our due diligence to bring forward a proposal as we were tasked to do. The numbers so far, we're not 100% comfortable with, but it may be, it is what it is type of numbers except for fine tuning it. And I think if we get to a point where we fine tuned it the best we could and feel that we have a good project, even though it's expensive, I think that's the time to go to the Board of Selectmen and say, okay, what do you want us to do with this information? Do you want us to bring it to town meeting as a proposal, or do you want to do something different?
Right. That's kind of where I was going with my comments, that, that's what we're tasked to do. We got to get this number to a point where we think it's a realistic number that's as cost effective as we can get it, but obviously doesn't neglect, I'll just say it's as cost effective as we can get it. That presents the project to the town based on what we were charged to do. I mean, I think we're obligated to do that.
Okay.
It's $5 million more than we kind of had in our minds, which, by the way, we really never communicated with anybody. But if it's $5 million more than we had, than the number that was sort of floating around in people's heads, there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them were stated tonight. We're packing a ton of program into this building, and we're going to touch all the different spaces and give an upgrade to all those different programs, where some of the previous estimates that we had, I don't know if they really did that. It's 2021, guys, and it's no cheaper to build now than it was 5, 10 years ago, whatever, even last year. So, I think, I think we need to be, I think your question, Dave Blatt, about having a number about what it costs to build new is definitely a good number to have. But actually, the way I'm looking at it now, they gave us a number that's like 18 million, and we're comparing that with 19 million. you know, it's, I get that you get a new building and it's not exactly apples to apples, but it's, you know, that it's not like it's a significant savings. You're still talking about an $18 million project maybe. So, I don't know. I kind of agree with Dave Passios' comment that really what we're obligated to do is bring the best cost estimate to the town that meets the objectives of our committee. And, you know, we have more work to do to drill down to that number. But I agree. I think then we bring it to the select board and we say, we're definitely not ready for spring because Heather would have needed to have vetted this and figured out how we're going to fund it. And then she can't do that until she has a final number and we're just not there yet. So, but after we drill down to that number, I think that's when we start having those more detailed discussions with the select board and also just float how we would fund it and how that, and then those discussions about how it fits into the overall town budget, which Mr. Beardmore, who's on the call, was very eloquently discussed 3 weeks ago, which I found very, very helpful. But it's a bigger picture, but it's not, unfortunately, it's not the charge of our committee. Unfortunately, or fortunately.
Right.
But it's really not the charge of our committee. I mean, our charge is to say to the town, listen, this program is going to cost this much. So now we have to decide as a town, how does that fit in with our current debt service, future debt service that we might expect down the road in other capital projects. And that's the charge of the probably the select board and the finance committee and others, you know? So I think I kind of agree with that.
Okay. And Greg, I basically agree 100% because really, if you think about it, we were appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And, you know, our first charter is to me, our first thing is to report back to them our findings more than anything else. And if it's their wishes for us to go in front of town meeting, it's their wishes, not ours, type of thing. And then also the second part of this is that we haven't created just a town hall. We have created town hall, school offices, you know, extended school, community center, all of that in one building. So I think we've gone well above and beyond what would have been just town hall. I mean, town hall, we probably could have chopped off 2/3 of this building and made it town hall, you know, if that was the case. And I don't think we would be showing up for 18 million for 2/3 of this building, you know, gone type of thing. Yeah. So that's the side I have. I think we've done over and above what we were originally talked about. And this is actually I think this is quite amazing what amount of space the amount of people we're serving with this one building out of all the groups we could have. And this is coming from the guy that was campaigning for the Boys and Girls Club for a month and a half on you guys. I believe that we've really done a good job seeing what the schools need right now and everybody else. This is good. I mean, I think this actually in a way saves the town money in the long run, because otherwise you'd be the schools would be looking for something right now. You know, they'd be looking for another building. And what are you going to give them? Town hall? For ACE program and preschool and after school and preschool and all that stuff? I don't think that works.
The program we came up with meets and exceeds the current need. It meets and improves upon the current needs, you know, at that given.
Yeah.
Another point too is that, and I'm sure they're using today's cost for materials. I haven't heard any other numbers, but the one that always is very glaring out there for the local homeowner, especially building decks and all the stuff they're doing because they're home, is that lumber's gone up 110%. I don't know what the other materials have gone up, but I'm sure they're right with them. So we're in a spell where cost of materials is just out of this world compared to where it was 10 years ago. And not just by, you know, general inflation. This pandemic's driving all kinds of costs in a weird direction.
Yeah, there's the supply and demand side drivers to that equation. I think there's a lack of material because factories are not operating at full production across the world, and there's a higher, at least in this country, a higher than normal demand because everybody wants to build, like you said, everyone wants to build the deck and the backyard patio and everything. So
Right.
we're on the pinch on both the supply and demand side, I think.
It's because we can't get that Canadian lumber anymore, with the border closed. So, yeah. Mr. Chair, can I make a motion? I don't know if I'm supposed to make a motion or what on this thing.
Well,
But-
I don't know that we necessarily need a motion, but but if we could at least agree on I mean, if we can at least agree that on what I'm to go back to the design team with, but however you'd like to proceed, Mr.
No,
Black.
I don't know the rules for these type of meetings and
Well,
things
I don't
like
think
that.
we need a
But
motion. We don't need
Okay.
a motion because we're not approving something or what, but I mean, I do just want to have a consensus with, which I think we're there, that we need to go back with, some specific questions and just make sure we kind of have the final and best. And I can go through, I've been writing those down, but go ahead, Dave.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I mean, the idea that's what my questions are too.
Yeah.
Where was the savings for doing a single phase versus multi-phase? And understanding better the breakdown of the HVAC and the electrical as to what the costs are, why the costs are there for those. Because other than those two, there's really no savings. There's the only other thing we had was there's 2.5 million. I'm sorry, for 1.3 million for site work, and that's the only other area we have any kind of savings. But that's
Yeah, I actually have that as a question too. It just seems, I don't know. We're building some parking, but I don't know. We're not building that much parking.
and if that's the case, if we don't do the parking, what happens? Right?
Yeah. Can we, exactly. Can we, phase that in maybe? Okay.
That's a real good point because constructing that road all the way around the west wing and all of that, that might be a place where you could save some substantial money and just have foot traffic around the west wing and upgrade the parking lot in the rear, but not make that a drive around.
Right. And just make pull-in parking around the courtyard in the front instead of having it curbside parking. Just have it where they pull in. I think we probably can get more spaces in the front. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, we're way over the number of required spaces with the present layout. So if we lose that parking off the end of the west wing on the back corner, I don't think that's going to throw us into an issue with the number of spaces.
I think based on the occupancy, we needed 50 spaces. That was the only thing.
Yeah, we
Yeah, and they were over 100 and something spaces, weren't they?
Yeah,
Total?
we have well in excess.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing. The other thing I have on the list that we talked about right out of the gate was I wanted to give us their opinion on their reasoning behind dropping the contingency.
Yes.
Yes.
And also, that's basically, those are the main points that,
Because other than that, you really don't have a lot of savings anywhere. Any room for savings anywhere.
yeah,
Right.
which, in a way is, shouldn't be too surprising because we tasked them with giving us a cost-effective. I mean, we didn't want them to give us a lot of slop in the budget. We told them
Right.
we're interested in we weren't interested in bells and whistles. So they put a lot of bells and whistles in their design, So in one way, it's not super surprising that they can't find a lot of savings for us because we didn't ask them to give us any Cadillacs, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
But I think those questions are important and for the committee to understand that we have a good, best best offer. I mean, one other thing I guess I wanted to, best offer, I'm thinking real estate. Best estimate. One other thing I wanted to ask too was, and maybe we shouldn't worry too much about this, but if we eliminate the phasing, you know, presumably there's going to be a cost borne by somebody's budget line item. I guess most notably the schools about, you know, temporary space during construction or alternate space during construction.
The superintendent, though, she's indicated already that if they had to vacate the building, that they could, while not ideal, they can manage.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the biggest user that would have to vacate. I think, you know, then PAC is going to be impacted if we do it that way. But again, you know, setting up a studio in a remote, I mean, in a temporary area it is what it is if that's what happens to the building. At present, as you guys just said, you know, what's the occupancy of the building right now? PAC, schools, am I missing anything?
No.
That's it. So if the schools have already said that they can make do during a non-phased reconstruction, then they're okay. They're on board with it. PAC, I'm assuming, hasn't thought about it, but it might be something that we ask Steve and his people to think about and give us some feedback on. But those are the two users right now that would be affected by a non-phased renovation.
So has anybody reached out to Rob Oliver, the new DPW director?
I've traded calls with him. I haven't connected yet. I apologize for that. I owe him a call back. I called him, he called me, and then I dropped the ball.
Well, no worries, but I'm thinking that maybe he can give us some insight as to where we could do some savings as by owner.
Yeah, my specific questions to him were going to relate to, do we think we can absorb some of the paving costs through the town's pavement management plan? And do we think that, and did he have an opinion on things like where we could save money, like Matt and I deal with all the time with our private clients, things like curbing, you know, can we go to is he comfortable going to a cheaper curb and, you know, something getting away from a granite product, which is pretty high cost, and those kind of things. So I will get him on the phone and talk through those things.
And not only that, he's ultimately going to be maintaining this building, correct?
Yeah, currently it's under DPW. Yeah. Well,
There's an agreement with the school district. They're maintaining the building.
yeah, I know that's true, but I guess it would. So I guess what I should say is currently the DPW maintains the town offices. So that's an interesting question. I guess because so much of this building would end up being school. That's a great question.
Greg, one other thing I'm wondering is if we could get a breakdown of the site work number in a
Yeah, I
separate
have that.
spreadsheet.
I have that as one of the bullets, Dave.
Okay, thank you.
Press them a little bit on the site work cost, and can we get some more breakdown?
Yep.
Both the site work cost and also the HVAC and the electrical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back up on that. So, all right, I'll reach out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Since I figured we're going to be losing Michael Ray and yourself shortly anyhow, right?
Michael Ray, I know I'm good till past 7 because, like I said, my meeting isn't going to start right at 7. So.
Yeah, I have to sign off, unfortunately. And
All right. Well, I don't expect actually too much more substance in the meeting anyway, Michael Ray. This is really the primary thing that I almost called it a workshop because I felt like we needed to have kind of a roundtable type discussions. All right. Does anybody have any more they want to add to that agenda item?
I think you did a great. I think we did a great job of, you know, coming to some
Yeah.
kind of consensus. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Onward. Bear with me, Mike. Pulling the agenda up here. Okay, next agenda is review and approve minutes. Brian, I don't think has issued any new ones,
No.
so we'll wait on that. He's away this week, I know, so. Okay, correspondence to and from the committee. I got to apologize to the committee. I had suggested that I would draft a letter that we would send, or a memo that we'd send to the select board, and I just have not gotten to that. So and perhaps given the conversation we had tonight, that maybe it makes sense to wrap it into an actual presentation to their board once we get a final cost anyway. So, but this is still on my radar screen, and I'll circle some language around. I apologize. I lost the, fell off my radar screen. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to? So this is a agenda where I thought that people could bring up anything that they've, any correspondences of note that they've had with anybody around town, or any of the other boards. It doesn't have to be formal correspondence, but if there was anything to bring up, I thought that this would be a good point to do it.
Greg, if I may, the one thing that I've heard from many of the hardcore supporters of this project being at TC Passios, and again, in a new building, you mitigate this issue with elevators, but the big concern for many of them, and yes, many are senior citizens or headed in that direction in the next decade, is that the building is more or less on one floor. All of the uses are all on one floor. And as I say, that's something that a lot of people out in the general public like about the possibility of the uses being there. So that's the biggest thing I've heard.
Yep. Okay.
Well, and then also another note about the elevator is if you've got a 2 or 3 story building, I think you can do it with hydraulics rather than the cables, which is considerably less expensive. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah. I know you can do it I know you can do a hydraulic system with actually, it's even a 4 story. That I know of a building that's fairly new elevator, and they did a hydraulic system. So.
Yeah, it's just considerably less expensive than
Yeah.
typical.
Yeah. Okay. So I will draft something for the next meeting to send around by way of a communication from this board to the select board, at least as a draft, to get us thinking about it.
Can we kind of put a tentative schedule over the next 6 weeks with an eye as to where we think we'd like to be ready to present to the Board of Selectmen? So we have a target date, and we really need to get on their agenda. At least they need to be aware a week to 10 days in advance to make sure we get on the agenda for a joint meeting.
And it's the first 3 Tuesdays of the month. Is that right, Michael Ray?
Yes.
And then you take the next one. So for me, to think that we'd be ready the middle of March is probably a little optimistic. But
Well,
maybe we'd be targeting maybe the first meeting in April.
Excuse me. I'd say though, if we're asking them to come back and give us their best and final for our next meeting, we're going to make it this. I feel we can make a decision at that meeting whether that's the number we want to. We're going to have a number to bring in front of them, and then it's a different discussion.
All right, now you're right. So we are planning to meet March 3rd.
Right.
2 weeks. And the select board meeting after that would be the 9th or the 16th. So I could ask Heather if we could have some agenda time for either of those 2 meetings.
I would say the sooner the better, because we are creeping up on town meeting pretty quick.
Yeah.
And the warrant closes on the 15th.
Of
So
March.
let's see if we can get on the 9th then, right?
Yeah, okay. Just to be clear though,
Good.
everybody, we're not gonna have a funding article there.
That's correct. Right.
Right. Yeah,
We just don't have.
I
time.
agree.
Yeah, but we might have a warrant, we might have an article that might have an article, but it's not gonna be to ask the town to vote to fund a project, because we would have needed to have the number now that Heather could work with, work it through with how we're gonna finance it to have it published in time, and it's just not, it's not there.
But we may need some funding if we're going to continue along the design path.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right. Well, but that's still, you know, by then we would have a sentiment from them I would hope we'd have a sentiment as to whether we're looking at fine tuning a new design, or whether they say, okay, 18 million is a good number. That's the number. Let's bring it in front of town meeting.
yeah, and that number, I don't think, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but a number like that, we wouldn't necessarily have to have that final number. We could do that. We could have a placeholder.
It doesn't need to be a separate article, so long as Heather, well, actually, I think it would need to be a separate article. Yeah,
It would need to be separate.
usually a placeholder would work. Yep.
I mean, we could have an article that would fund additional design costs, not knowing exactly what those are. We just would have to have them before a certain point, obviously, but we wouldn't necessarily have to have it by the close of the warrant, I don't think.
Correct.
But
Shortly
And I think if you
thereafter.
work that out with Heather, because she
Yeah,
may
I
have some
will.
money within the budget that she can reallocate also.
yeah,
You
all
know,
right.
if it's not a huge amount of money.
So I'll ask for some March 9th agenda time and see what she can do for us. This would be the next meeting after our March 3rd meeting.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And then so our meeting schedule was intended to be March 3rd and March 17th.
17th, yep. I
If I
think
can
we
just-
keep, I'd like to keep that if we could, because, you know,
Absolutely.
after we meet with the Board of Selectmen, we may have a new charge, or we may know where we're headed for the springtime anyway.
Absolutely.
When you correspond with Heather, I would just encourage you to let her know that there's potential for the need for some kind of money, and that we need to get this scheduled prior to the warrant close.
Okay. Yep.
And we said the 3rd and the 17th.
Yes.
The 3rd and the 17th, but then we'd have with the possible 9th. And we can decide whether we all want to be there, or we just want to have someone meet with them. But
I think I'd like us to post it as a meeting, even if you only give the presentation, Craig.
that's fine.
It allows us to all be there at the meeting if we choose to.
Yep, that's fine. Okay. All right. That good enough, or do you want to push it out into April too?
No, I think that's good, because, you know, we don't know what direction we're going to have after those first 2 or 3 weeks of March. And once we do, then we can map out into April and May.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, can you really plan your schedule for April right now? I can't.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I'm like, I could, you know, plan for next week. You know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, Dave, if I've already put something in the way, I can usually push everything else aside.
Yep.
I know
Understand.
you guys can't, but
Yeah.
my particular situation.
All right. So I guess we are at public comment. So I will take any public comment from the public. And you can, you don't have to be formal here. You can just, there's only a few of us. Go ahead, Mr. Beardmore. I think you might have a
Double mute.
your computer might be muted, a local mute maybe.
How about now?
Gotcha.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
New computer. Good evening. I just want to scratch a little bit on this topic of funding. How much money has this committee spent at this point?
What was it? What was the article? Because the article money is spent.
If I recall, it was 275, I want to say, in that neighborhood.
265, I think, but in the ballpark.
Yeah.
I think that I think that if the committee believes that more funding is needed to get to a point where we're going to pursue an alternative to the project that has been developed over the course of the last year and a half, that we probably need to do some back of the napkin work and look at all of the potential alternatives, which I think would include the site where TC Passios is now, the old primary school location, and I would add 635 Mass Avenue to that list. And I think that a conversation needs to be had with the board of the select board, but possibly also with town meeting, and directionally figure out, okay, now we know what we know. And if that is not the financial approach that we want to take, then what is the most likely path that is going to please the most people for the next project? I don't see a scenario where anybody is going to give this committee or anybody else a blank check to go on another exploratory expedition. So I just want to throw that out there, that I think that if this is not the project that is going to go to a town meeting, then we need to be deliberate about what the next thing is. And that's my comment.
I appreciate that, Peter. Thanks. Can I ask a quick follow-up question to you?
It's your meeting.
What, flush out what you mean by bring it to town meeting.
Yeah, so we've had at past town meetings, we've done non-binding referendums, right? So in my view of the town of Lunenburg, having been active in the public sphere off and on in Lunenburg for 20 plus years now, since I was a teenager, frankly, there's about 200 people in Lunenburg who give a crap and are going to participate, right? And you're going to get half to 2/3 of those people, maybe even 3/4 at town meeting. And if you get a good sense of what the town meeting voters think about something, the more likely you are to go on a path that is ultimately going to succeed. And I think that the town meeting voters are more representative of what will be approved, frankly, than the Board of Selectmen, who in a case like this, they can vote to put it on a warrant or not, or on a ballot or not, but ultimately their vote is just as powerful as yours or mine. And so I think that, town meeting needs to hear a report, and they need to be given some directional options to weigh in on.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, are there any final comments from the committee?
Good job.
Okay, all right. Okay, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved at 6:56 p.m.
I'll second.
Okay, I'll roll call vote. Dave Passios,
Hi.
Blatt,
Aye.
Matthew Elson,
Aye.
and I for me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
night, guys.
Appreciate
Good
it.
night.